Hey there, and welcome to the Confident Woman Podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Brooks. Join me as I sit down and chat with co-hosts, friends, and carefully curated guests and talk about all the things that empower you to become your best and most confident self. So, let's get started. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Confident Woman Podcast. So today, because I'm hearing from so many of you, and I want to thank you for reaching out after last episode and just hearing from so many of you that it really resonated that one, this is comforting for me to realize I'm not alone, but also you guys are not alone. And so I thought it would be, something of interest to keep going with some of these real-time vulnerable shares and just being a little bit more transparent, which is something that, again, I'm trying to incorporate more into my life and being a little bit more open and transparent on the inner struggles that I'm going through, which I think, not just so much of going through, but have come through. And these are part of the things that I wanted to share with the lessons and some of these ahas. And it's the irony of that is the more I'm sharing this also because I'm learning it and I'm connecting with so many more of you listeners here, but also ladies even here in our community. And it's brought our community a lot closer. We have these honest conversations. And I have always felt that was really what was missing in my personal life. But as we see from our community, and actually the feedback was incredible because the ladies in our community are also saying, we have yet to find a place like this. Like, where can we just show up as our hot mess selves and talk about the crap that we deal with on a daily, but it's not a place where we commiserate. It's a place where we can honestly say, hey, anyone else going through this? Like, I tried X, Y, and Z, and it's just not getting there. Like, sometimes we just need to voice this out. We just need a place where we can have these open, honest conversations. And that's what I'm finding, like, in our community that I'm also a part of, that I'm also contributing, and I'm also sharing. And it's so freaking cool to see it reciprocated throughout. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is really what women supporting women, women inspiring women, women healing on their journey, like all this stuff is that we are not meant to do any of this alone. We need others. We need community. And one of the biggest things that I've come through on my own journey here through this pandemic is how much I didn't realize the impact that it had on the solitude and the isolation. And to be honest with you, when it happened and we got quarantined and shut down and locked down and all that jazz, I honestly said to myself, I was like, cool, I don't have to go anywhere now. And being extroverted, no, how do I call myself? I say I am a social introvert. And I would say, wow, that's cool because now I get the best of both worlds. Like, I get to socialize through like calls and Zooms and connections, and then I don't have to feel so energetically drained because of my introversion and my social awkwardness and anxiety and things like that. And so that's how I pump myself up about it. I was so happy internally thinking, oh my gosh, that time that I will save from the decisions of making what clothes am I going to wear? Who's going to be there? How do I have to prep? It just, my head was filled with so much of that thought of bandwidth just being used just to prepare to go somewhere and be in those meetings, which felt so taxing because at that point in my life, I was immersed in so much of my business, to the podcast, to all of it, right? And it felt like this trajectory that it just was going at a straight shot and it was not sustainable. And when pandemic hit, and like I said, with the lockdown, it relieved such pressure. And I think just as a recovering perfectionist, it relieved a lot of that pressure to perform. And that was the biggest thing where I could say, I don't have to perform. I don't have to be perfect. And I don't have to worry about what I'm wearing, how I'm sounding, how I'm doing this, right? So a lot of that negative self-talk kind of got a little bit quiet. So and I'm talking about at the very beginning of this pandemic. So things were just very easy. And what happens with ease? I got very comfortable. I became complacent. I just started going through the motions. I started going through the motions so much that my business was on autopilot. I didn't make the changes that I probably now looking back should have because I wasn't aware of it. Again, we didn't have the insight as to what we have now looking back because nobody even knew what tomorrow was going to bring. We didn't know how long this pandemic was going to happen or last or the degree of it, right? We didn't know. We're living in such uncertain times that it almost felt counterproductive to immediately react and start making all these changes. But then, as I said, I got really comfortable and complacent that as things started to come to the surface, I don't think that I made the changes that I needed to, or more or less didn't have the awareness to do so. And when I started realizing that things were starting to catch up and now I became very reactive in the constant chasing of, oh my gosh, we're behind now. We got to do this. We got to do that, right? And so this constant pressure to perform, the anxieties were creeping up. The uncertainties were growing larger. And the next thing I know, I was finding myself in this hyped up, overreactive, panic-driven, anxiety-riddled space where I'm just like, holy crap, what the heck happened? And it was like this tidal wave just knocked me down. So as I was coming to the surface, metaphorically speaking, where I was just now catching my breath, there were just moments where I could catch my breath. It felt like this was spiraling so quickly out of control because it's almost like the damage was done and I'm trying now to put out the fires that should never have been started. But looking back and hearing back from so many of you, we all had these fires that we were so focused on putting out that other areas of our life had been neglected. And in doing so, I realized that I had neglected my own overall health and well-being. Pandemic, again, shut down the gyms. So workouts were very hit or miss. They weren't very strong in that sense, meaning I kind of more or less half-assed my workouts just to say that I got some movement up from sitting all day to not taking care of myself through my nutrition because we, scrambling, right? Where there's urgency and this, you just kind of eat whatever you got. And then the scarcity when you go to the store and all the food's missing and, so it just became this wild, wild west kind of feel like everyone for themselves. And I think just overall, it just really took a toll on me mentally, emotionally, and then physically where I felt like just not my best. I was tired all the time, half-assing everything I was doing to neglecting my nutrition, right? So I'm eating possibly like sometimes I would eat a can of soup a day. Like that was where I was finding myself like, oh my gosh, I haven't eaten. So what do I do? To drinking my protein instead of eating real meals. And the next thing I know, like I said, when things start compounding over time and I'm looking back and I'm like, what the heck happened? How did I get here? So, when we look back at this, and I think this is just a very important piece that I want to share is that looking back, we realize that we, through our choices, through our actions, and, obviously being an advocate for, women's empowerment and self-empowerment and, inspiring, encouraging, and empowering individuals, I felt then at that point, how did I let myself go? How did I get here? How can I say that I'm my best and most confident self? How can I call myself the confident woman when I don't feel this way, right? And so we could find ourselves going down these dark paths if we don't correct course before we, really get to the deep end. But I share that because there was so much uncertainty, and in uncertainty, in those areas of uncertainty, we find ourselves filled with self-doubt. We are riddled with fear and anxiety, worry, all those things, right? So we're going to the opposite end of the spectrum of where we want to be, right? To create this abundant life and feel happiness and joy and all those things. And I was finding myself further and further and further every single day. So just by sharing that is where I had that aha revelation. I said, whoa, Rachel, what happened. Look backwards. Let's take this step back and see where we went off path so we can start making those correct behavioral changes or habit changes or thought patterns or our beliefs. Sometimes we need to revisit those, right? And so I started really unraveling my kind of ball of yarn mess and seeing where I had got off path. And now, as I was sharing in a previous episode, where over these past several long months, the small micro changes have now started to build up and are compounding over time, which I say consistency compounded over time yields results. So the results that I was getting, because they weren't consistent good ones, I had to readdress and re-implement in a more positive way. And now watching things unfold in a positive direction is so encouraging. And so if you're finding yourself in situations like this or any of that's like, holy crap, that was me. Yep. There's always hope. There's always way around something. There's always ways to find solutions. And I think it's just our biggest thing is to be confident in your ability to always figure things out. And even though we don't know the answers, the fact that we're moving forward, the fact that we're gifted another day, the fact that you're here because of some great things that you're doing in life, it may not be where you want to be in this moment of your life, but you have that power to make those changes. And that starts today. And so when you start measuring your progress and your successes, refer to that and measure it from who you were yesterday. And that will keep some of that progress at bay. So you're not just auto set or autopilot and just set forget mode, which is what I had ended up doing. So I hope you learned these lessons through my terrible mistakes, but I just don't call them terrible on purpose. I'm joking about that because even though it feels terrible, there's so much positive gains and insight and all this awesomeness that really comes through it. And I think that's something that we should really shift our focus on is instead of how life is happening to you, shift that mindset and that focus and ask yourself, how is life working for you? All this bad, all this stuff, all whatever you don't like in life, you can flip that. You have that power. Flip it. Find the gains intentionally in all that mess, right? And I know that we'll be talking further about gains because that was something that I definitely learned from this season. But even in my book, Chasing Perfection, there are so many gains that came from my own quest of chasing perfection. And obviously, those who haven't read it, spoiler alert, right? Perfection doesn't exist. But the biggest gain there was to focus on the progress. And that's what I want to definitely talk about on our next episode, because again, focusing on that progress, you're going to see the gains. So if this resonates with you, definitely let me know. And I would look for you inside the Facebook community group, The Confident Woman. And hopefully we will continue this conversation because I'd love to hear from you and seeing what positive changes that you can start implementing today that will move you closer to where you want to be tomorrow. All right. Until next time, take care. Hey there. Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode of the Confident Woman podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode as much as I did, please be sure to like, subscribe, and leave us a review. Thanks again for listening.